What are some events in recorded history that are extremely hard to believe, but without a doubt actually happened? My colleague was on the plane to Hawaii where the entire top of the plane ripped off. They flew the rest of the way without any overhead. Landed and everyone walked off. Absolutely insane to see the pictures. Talk about being given a second chance. In 1908, Russia showed up 12 days late to the Olympics because the world switched calendars while they did not. The Battle of Bull Run, one of the first battles of the U.S. Civil War, occurred on and around Wilmer McClean's farm in Northern Virginia. Not wanting to live surrounded by war, McClean and his family moved to Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. The Battle of Appomattox Courthouse was the last significant battle between Union and Confederate forces. The Confederates signed the surrender order in Wilmer's sitting room. It is said that the Civil War started on Wilmer's farm and ended in his sitting room. In 2014, Pope Francis released doves in the Vatican to symbolize his hopes for peace in the world. As soon as the doves began to fly, a seagull and a crow swooped down and attacked them in front of everyone. Nicholas Alcemade fell 18,000 feet without a parachute from a burning plane in 1944 and suffered no serious injury. Michael Malloy aka Mike the Durable aka Iron Mike. During the Great Depression, 5 men took out a life insurance policy on a homeless alcoholic that they were sure was going to drink himself to death. The owner of a bar allowed him to drink for free, but he kept drinking and didn't die. So they tried to poison him with antifreeze. Didn't work. The turpentine, horse liniment, rat poison, methanol, still didn't work. A sandwich made with rotten sardines and tacks. Still no luck. Then they took his drunk body out in the cold and poured water on him. He lived. Then they ran him over with a car. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks, but survived. Then they poisoned him with carbon monoxide, and he finally died. They were all convicted of murder. The Battle of Castle Itter, in WW2 was fought between the Waffen-SS and a group comprised of American and German soldiers, local resistance fighters, and several French celebrities, including Paul Renault, who had been the Prime Minister of France during WW1. John O'Neill, the FBI agent in charge of investigating Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden in the 1990s, grew frustrated with the bureaucratic politics within the FBI and between the FBI and CIA that he felt hampered his mission. He decided to leave the FBI and take a higher-paying job in the private sector. In August 23, 2001, he became the chief of security at the World Trade Center. He was killed in the attacks just a few weeks later. The Battle of Halys in roughly 6th century BC, the Medes and the Lydians were at war. The war had lasted for 6 years and climaxed at the Battle of Halys. During the battle, a solar eclipse began. Both sides believed that the gods were angry at their long and bloody war, and were taking the sun away from them. They declared peace that day, literally throwing down their weapons and embracing their newly former enemies as the sun was returned. They declared a formal peace shortly after. But yeah, a war ended because of a solar eclipse. The Nutmeg Wars. The Dutch and the English went to war 3 times over nutmeg, which at the time was only known to grow on one South Pacific island. Theodore Roosevelt found his boat was stolen. So he built a new boat, tracked the thieves down and arrested them. He then proceeded to walk them multiple days, without sleeping, so they could receive a trial instead of just shooting them on the spot. It was in the middle of a harsh winter, so he didn't handcuff them, for fear they'd get frostbite, so instead he just kept himself awake by reading Tolstoy with a gun trained on them the whole trek. In 2019, a convicted murderer on day release bravely fought off a terrorist at London Bridge with a narwhal tusk. Edited to add that he was a convicted murderer, thanks to r/Rainbow Warrior for reminding me. Edited again to add that the guy with the narwhal tusk was a civil servant and the convict on day release battled the terrorist with a fire extinguisher. This story gets more awesome with every correction. Winky face. Edwin Booth, brother of John Wilkes Booth, saved the life of Robert, the son of President Abraham Lincoln. John the Blind, king of Bohemia, insisted on fighting in battle and had his aides tie their horses together so they were not separated. He asked to be taken to where the battle was the loudest. The next day, they were all found dead with their horses still tied together. Edit: he didn't have AIDS that we know of, but AIDS. Christmas Day 1914. The truce on the WW1 battlefields shows the humanity inside everyone, but they were able to wake up the next day and go straight back to war, kill the men that they'd spent a sincere day with. During Alexander the Great's destruction of the Mediterranean, he was going to leave a small island named Tyre for later, as it would have been hard to besiege it, but the people of Tyre laughed and mocked him, so he literally built a bridge to their island and conquered its skull. The time Indiana tried to legislate the value of pi and #X200B. In 1903, the New York Times published an article about flying machines. They stated that it would take the combined efforts of all mathematicians and mechanics 1 to 10 million years for powered flight to be achieved. Anyway, about 9 weeks later, the Wright brothers achieved powered flight for the first time. Here is the article. They were also overly cynical afterwards. In 1910, they said that flight would only ever be for billionaires. Of course, we had commercial flights by around the 60s achievable for many. 1816, the year without summer. The Ghost Army in World War II. Essentially, an American group of troops would deploy dummy tanks, broadcast fake radio chatter, and deploy loud sound effects over speakers to fool the Nazis into thinking there was a large military presence coming their way. The Ghost Army was used to deceive the Nazis and make them send their military presence elsewhere, which provided openings for the real Allied forces to move in. This was used in the later parts of the war. I never learned about this in school, but I discovered it on my own and thought it was fascinating. Imagine thinking a whole mess of tanks are heading your way, but in reality, it's a couple of inflatable dummies and a few speakers. Tarare, this guy's whole life was an event. He was a living horror movie monster. Elevator operator Betty Lou Oliver survived a fall of 75 stories while in an elevator in 1945. I still find it totally insane that we were able to put men on the moon with the technology of the time. It blows my mind. Probably the greatest of all human achievement. That animals, if trained enough, can smell out disease. Has anyone posted about the hot air balloon to the Arctic? That's insane to hear about. I can't remember if they made it or just were close, but the balloon crashed and they ended up all dying. Reading about that also made me learn you can die from vitamin A overdose, and eating seal or polar bear liver will give you that. John Tyler was the 10th President of the United States. He was born in 1790 and took office in 1841. His grandson died in 2020. When the pyramids were being built, woolly mammoths still existed. The last use of the guillotine in France was the same year Star Wars was founded. The Four Pests Campaign. Mao Zedong, in his infinite hubris, thought that there would be no repercussions from an attempt to completely eliminate rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. Plot twist, there were repercussions. Millions of people organized into groups and hit noisy pots and pans to prevent sparrows from resting in their nests, with the goal of causing them to drop dead from exhaustion. Sparrows were replaced with bed bugs, as the extermination of sparrows had upset the ecological balance, which subsequently resulted in surging locust and insect populations that destroyed crops due to a lack of a natural predator. The ecological disruption was one of several factors that led to a famine that killed 45 million people. There would have been a third, and a nuclear World War and possibly the end of the world if Stanislaw Petro didn't react like he did on the 25th of September, 1983. In short, he was the only one that questioned the readings on the Russian missile alert system and refused to launch nuclear countermissiles. Wikipedia article.